I was just at our mailbox at the end of the driveway, checking the mail, when a red BMW drove by and turned into the neighbor's house. As he pulled up to the garage, the door opened to let the car in and then closed again. This seemed strange to me. I knew Kyle Good was away. Why did some person come into their garage? I thought there could be many innocent reasons. Maybe it's Doris's cousin or brother. Who knows? And it's certainly none of my business. The incident was quickly forgotten when I noticed a letter in my mailbox from my sister, who lives in Florida. Gina always writes great letters, full of family news and lots of clippings from the dozens of publications she subscribes to. The next morning, as I was leaving my house on the way to work, the BMW flew past me so fast that I had to slam on the brakes to avoid crashing into it. I probably would still have ignored the whole incident if my wife Jenny and I hadn't stopped by the Goods house on Friday night while we were walking the dog. The red BMW was parked on the street and Kyle Good was standing on his porch talking to the guy I saw driving the car earlier in the week. Kyle and the guy approached us as we walked along the sidewalk. George, Jenny, hello. Jenny and I paused until the two men approached the sidewalk. George, I'd like to introduce you to my best friend, Harry Thompson. Harry, this is our neighbor George. I shook Harry's hand and turned to introduce Jenny. This is my wife, Jenny. It didn't surprise me that Harry, letting go of my hand, took Jenny's hand and looked at it like it was dessert. When you're married to a woman as beautiful as Jenny, you get used to men licking their lips at her. But there was an expression on this guy's face that I couldn't read, perhaps a smirk, as if he knew something I didn't. Now that I knew that Harry was Kyle's best friend and not some relative, my head began to buzz with the thought of why this guy spent the night at Kyle's while he was away. Could there be something going on between Harry and Kyle's wife, Doris? Personally, I can't imagine a lower being than a best friend who sleeps with his friend's wife. But perhaps there was an innocent explanation. For example, the guy came on business and needed a place to stay for the night. So I asked, Harry, where do you live? Harry replied, across the river in St. Paul. So this option is eliminated. Harry is not related and doesn't live far enough away to need a room for the night during the trip. It remains. Harry was still looking at Jenny like he was ready to jump on her, so I said we should continue walking the dog and said goodbye to Kyle and Harry. This left me with a dilemma. Should I say something to Kyle? Part of me wanted to stay away from it. Part of me realized that Kyle had been becoming a friend since Jenny and I moved into the area 7 months ago, and if it were me, I'd want to know if my wife was cheating. By Sunday, my decision was made. While Kyle was mowing the lawn, I walked over to talk. After exchanging pleasantries, I immediately got down to business. Kyle, on Monday evening, while you were away, your best friend Harry spent the night at your house. I was amazed at Kyle's reaction. He even started laughing, answering. George, of course, did. I'm sure he gave Doris a lot of pleasure. My jaw dropped. I couldn't find the words to respond to Kyle's statement. Kyle continued to laugh as he explained. George, I thought you knew. Doris and I have an open relationship. It took me a few seconds to realize this. Are you saying that you two are sleeping with other people? Furthermore, we're doing guy swaps. Have you ever noticed cars here every 2 weeks? When is it our turn to arrange meetings? Organize meetings? Kyle seemed to enjoy my confusion. Yes, George, arrange meetings. 6 or more couples and lucky singles like Harry come here, and we all switch partners. We have each other's wives. I still had no clear answer to Kyle's news when he asked the inevitable question. Would you and Jenny want to join us? We are always looking for new members. Doris and I would be on top if we brought you two into the company. This question brought me out of my stupor. No, Kyle, there is no way we will participate in something like that. As I turned to leave, I heard Kyle shout after me. It's a pity. The fact is that this is not the first time that the issue of exchanging partners has arisen recently. 3 or 4 months ago, Jenny and I were relaxing after a particularly intense hour of sex when she asked me about it. I was enjoying the post-orgasm bliss, having just come, making love to my wife from behind, when Jenny asked, George, What are your fantasies? I pondered the question as my heart rate and breathing slowly returned to normal. I'd like to make love to you on the beach. Apparently, I didn't give Jenny the answer she wanted, so she asked again. What else? I was almost afraid to mention it, but decided to give it a chance. Promise me you won't think I'm a pervert if I tell you. Jenny propped herself up on her elbow, turning to face me. I promise, George. What is this? Remember, you promised. I want you to dress like an approachable girl, in high heels, wearing a little black dress that barely covers your ass and shows off your gorgeous breasts with plenty of cleavage. I want you to go to the hotel bar without me. I want you to sit on a high stool at the bar, with your long legs peeking out from under that little black dress. Then I'll walk into the bar, pretend I don't know you. I'll buy you a drink, we'll talk until you finish, then I'll take you out of the bar, with all the men looking on, take you to the room I've reserved, and we'll have sex for hours. What if one of the men at the bar tries to buy me a drink or pick me up? You will ignore them, of course. Jenny insisted. Wouldn't you like to watch me flirt with some guy at the bar before you pick me up? Wouldn't that turn you on? Hell no. My kinky fantasy might include you dressing like a bitch in public, but not that perverted. What about exchanging partners? Have you ever thought about having sex with another couple or multiple couples? Jenny, I have no desire to sleep with another woman, and certainly no desire to watch another man have you. Why? Is this your fantasy? Jenny was smart enough to give me the correct answer given my fading state. No, George. I just asked because many couples have this fantasy. I just wanted to know if you have it. Jenny ended the call. I fell asleep immediately after this. The conversation about fantasies was forgotten. It wasn't until months later, when I was telling Jenny about the goddess parties, that I remembered her question. Have you ever thought about swapping with another couple? After I left Kyle that afternoon, I walked back to our house. Jenny sunbathed outside in a skimpy bikini. I took a beer from the refrigerator and sat next to her on the terrace. Jenny, did you know that the Goods are perverts and have sex parties with other couples? Jenny's response was revealing. Anytime Jenny is talking to someone, she lifts her sunglasses up onto her head so the other person can see her blue eyes. Jenny's father told me years ago that he taught his children to take off their glasses when they talked to someone. He told me this because he wanted me to follow the same advice. He was tired of talking to me when my eyes were in the shadows. This, according to him, made him distrustful. So I suspected something was wrong when Jenny turned to me, still wearing her glasses, to answer my question. No, George. Why do you think so? From Kyle. He said it directly. I told him that Harry spent the night at his house while he was away. He waved it off, said he and Doris have an open relationship, that they trade and have parties. Well, I don't see what this has to do with us. I can't believe you ratted Doris out to Kyle. Why did you do that? Jenny, if you were cheating on me, I would want a real friend to tell me. It's still a betrayal. I thought all boys were taught not to tell stories when they grew up. It depends on the seriousness of the offense. You don't talk about small things, but if it's important then... Jenny interrupted me. And what's so terrible if Doris cheats? Who does she harm? Without thinking, I answered Jenny. Jenny, you speak as if adultery is something insignificant. For many marriages, this is a deciding factor. Most spouses have difficulty coping with the infidelity of their husbands or wives. Jenny's answer amazed me. Well, that's just stupid. It's just sex. I was still stunned and silent when Jenny diffused the whole situation. George, whatever the Goods do is their business, not ours. As long as we love and trust each other and are true to our vows, we should not quarrel. Come and kiss me. You haven't kissed me for several hours. I kissed Jenny, but something haunted me in our conversation. Something I'll think about later when I'm not distracted by Jenny's slender body in that red bikini. Over the next few weeks, I began to watch Jenny more closely. I must admit that almost everything in our daily life was completely normal. Our sex life didn't suffer. We still had sex at least 3 or 4 times a week, and the weekend sessions still amazed me, sometimes lasting for hours. There were no external signals that would alert me with the exception of two. First, one day when I picked up Jenny's phone to look up her phone number in her contacts, the phone was locked. This was new. Jenny had never blocked her phone before. She said it was too inconvenient. Secondly, I noticed that Jenny was clearing the history on our computer. Again, this was not her habit. Both of these small points were alarming. But as someone once sang, "From little things, mother, one day big things grow." None of these obstacles were difficult to overcome. With some concern that I was invading Jenny's privacy, I installed a program on our computer that recorded activity in the background. Jenny could clear the history, but the computer would still save it in a file that I could view. It wasn't difficult to crack her phone password. I very casually handed Jenny the phone and asked for her brother's phone number. I didn't even mention that the phone was locked, and Jenny didn't notice that her back was to the mirror when she unlocked it. I had my phone in my hands, recording the image in the mirror while I waited for her to give me Matt's number. The web pages Jenny visited over the next few weeks were interesting. She seemed to enjoy reading erotic stories on the internet. What was more disturbing to me was that the stories mostly focused on sex with multiple partners. Every time I had a chance, I read the texts on Jenny's phone, and for several weeks there was nothing out of the ordinary, no calls to anyone I considered a potential lover. Nothing until I told Jenny that I had to go on a business trip for a week and a half. My work as a translator usually required travel every 2 months. Employees took turns going on business trips so that no one was overloaded. 2 days after I told her the news, during which time Jenny seemed very sad that I would be gone so long, I read a message from Doris on Jenny's phone. We agreed on Saturday. Despite the short period of time, 5 couples confirmed their participation because you will be with us again. And you know how happy Kyle and Harry are. See you then. I was furious, almost to the point where he couldn't think clearly. My bitch wife was pretending to miss me while she was going to have fun with a bunch of idiots. I nearly exploded as I reread the message, the word again being the deciding factor. But it's time to get together and start planning. I will have plenty of time later to mourn the end of my marriage. The next morning I found and made an appointment with a divorce lawyer. Then I asked my boss to let me cancel the business trip. He came up with a stupid excuse why I couldn't go and promised to compensate my deputy later. He grumbled and made a big deal out of it, which was nonsense because I've probably filled in for my colleagues at least twice in the past year. After his little scene, he agreed that I could take 10 days off. On Thursday morning, I kissed Jenny goodbye and checked into the Residence Inn instead of heading to the airport. I used my company credit card to rent a car, which was a clear violation of company policy, but I didn't care anymore and bought everything I thought I'd need. I met with a divorce attorney on Friday to understand my options and what to do if I decide to divorce Jenny. The picture was not happy. We would basically divide all of our assets, and I would probably end up paying her child support for up to 5 years. Jenny worked part-time and earned very little, but it gave her discounts on all the clothes she bought. Jenny loved to dress beautifully. This was never a big problem. The house was always in order. Dinner was on the table almost every night, and I made good money. Now, her modest salary meant that I would have to supplement her income until she got a new profession. Wait, are you saying that she can ruin our marriage, and I will still have to pay her? The lawyer shrugged. Yes, this is exactly how the laws are structured now. Adultery does not matter if you are divorcing your spouse. Now I realized how naive I was, both in relation to the wife and in relation to the law. Let's say I don't want the system to rob me. What options do I have? The guy smiled. Before I say another word, write me a check for $500, because what I'm about to say implies that you and I never had this conversation and will never see each other again. I wrote out a check and gave it to him. First, let me ask you 2 questions. Do you like your job? Do you have family nearby that you will miss? I answered. I hate my job, and my parents and sister moved to Florida. The guy leaned back in his chair. Then I will continue, but this is not legal advice. This is me telling you what I would do in your situation. I would just disappear. I would take everything I could from the accounts and move away. It would be different if you had children. I would never recommend a father abandon his children, especially with a mother like that. But in your case, I say that the world is big. It's time to see him. That was the last thing I expected to hear. I should have asked. Why such a radical decision? Shouldn't I be better off taking my chances in court? You chose the wrong lawyer to ask this question. 4 years ago, I caught my wife with her trainer. I had videotapes, she and some beefy guy from the gym in our bed. The audio recording shows them laughing at me, how I work while they make me a cuckold. Unpleasant things. I divorced her and hired one of the best divorce lawyers in the area, better than me. 4 years later, I still pay her every month and will continue to do so for another year. This is the reward you will get if you treat your wife like a queen and don't force her to look for a well-paying job while you are married. Let's face it, the system is rigged against people like you and me. I left the lawyer's office, shaking my head, but beginning to formulate my plans. But first, I needed to know exactly what Jenny and her neighbors were doing. The sex party was planned for Saturday night, and if I was lucky, it would be at the Goode's house. We'd been there often enough for BBQs and poolside that I knew the layout and knew I'd be able to get a seat and spy on the activities. But just in case, I installed a tracking program on Jenny's phone. Saturday was a long day. I spent it in the hotel room, waiting for Jenny's phone to show that she was on the move. There was no need to wait long. At 5 in the evening, Jenny left the house and headed to the Goodes. I drove to our neighborhood in a rental car and parked on a nearby street. The Goodes have a small garden tool shed in their backyard, and I was able to get inside without being seen by climbing over a 6-foot fence. Over the next 2 hours, I used a video camera and a camera to document the adventures at the hoods. I recorded on video different combinations of pairs. I filmed them having sex by the pool or in the living room behind glass patio doors. I used a digital camera with a telephoto lens to take close-ups. The faces of the participants were clear enough that there was no doubt about their identity. The photographs were evidence of some of the most disgusting things I could imagine. The hardest part was watching and recording my wife. Yes, she was the main focus and the obvious star of the show. The other women at the party may have had decent bodies, but Jenny had the best, and all the men took advantage of the situation, sometimes in different combinations. You can't understand true heartbreak until you see the woman you love, who you were planning on having kids with and growing old together, having sex with 2 guys at once. The patio doors were closed, but I could still see in the lit room Jenny sitting on some guy's lap, clearly doing an erotic dance. The next guy threw her on the couch and started having sex. After almost 2 hours of this, I captured the faces of all participants and their compromising poses. It was time to leave. Sitting in the car, trying to calm down, I felt like I wanted to cry, but I didn't. I wanted to hurt Jenny and all her lovers, but I didn't. Instead, I returned to my hotel room after stopping to buy a bottle of Jack Daniels. I sat and thought about what to do next. I didn't get drunk. I sat until late at night, thinking about my life and the options that the lawyer gave me. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that other than being married to the woman I loved until tonight, my life was crap. I hated my boss and my job. I hated living in the Midwest with its cold winters. When the temperature finally rose above 0, it was still impossible to go outside because of the mosquitoes, and now they carried all sorts of diseases like the West Nile virus. Hated the big house that Jenny wanted so much before we had kids, with a large lawn that required watering and fertilizer to the point where it had to be mowed twice a week. I didn't care about almost any of my neighbors, and that number had just been cut in half. It was now clear that I would leave Jenny. I've heard that there are men who can tolerate their wife's cheating, even those who are turned on by it. How, I don't know, but it's not for me. I tried to sleep. It was hard, but sleep finally came after staring at the hotel room ceiling for what seemed like hours, thinking about how I screwed everything up and why things turned out the way they did. After graduating from the University of Minnesota with a double degree in German and Russian, the Army offered me a job. All you had to do was sign up for the next 4 years. The advantage of the army over other options was that I wouldn't have to spend 2 or 3 years doing menial work. I would immediately start doing real translations as soon as I finished basic training. I met Jenny during my last year in the Pentagon. Jenny was a waitress at a bar where my friends and I often hung out. I won't lie, the main attraction was a beautiful face, a sweet smile, and an amazing body. We dated for 7 months before I proposed to her. Jenny said yes, and 2 months after I left the army, we got married and settled in Minneapolis. Jenny had few skills. I don't want to sound bad, but among all of Jenny's great qualities, intelligence was not one of them. I couldn't imagine her going back to work in a bar. Damn, it was hard enough watching all the guys hit on her when we were dating. Although this meant less money, Jenny found a part-time job selling dresses. Money was not an issue as I was making good money, enough so that after 4 years, when prices had not yet fully recovered from the housing market crash, we could buy our dream home. Our main reasons for moving to Minneapolis played a cruel joke on me 2 years after the move. Dad received early retirement, and he and his mother decided to follow the example of other retirees and moved to Florida, selling their home. My sister, who never liked the harsh Minnesota winters, followed them there. I don't want to make excuses for Jenny. There is no excuse for her participation in the goods parties, but I think when my mom and sister moved to Florida, it left a void in Jenny's life. An emptiness that may have contributed to her subsequent infatuation with her new neighbors, especially Doris. After Jenny and I bought our house, we gave ourselves a year to get it in order and ready for the baby. Instead, I'm now trying to sleep in this strange bed, wondering what I'll be doing in a year instead of holding a newborn in my arms. I woke up Sunday morning glad I didn't overdo it on JD last night and didn't have a hangover to make me feel worse. There was a diner across the street that served a decent breakfast. I reviewed the list I had made, a few things I wanted to take with me, and a list of our assets, bank accounts, brokerage accounts, etc. The list of things I wanted to keep was short, and most of our money went towards a down payment on a house. I spent several hours in the room, sorting through photos and videos from the night before. It's amazing how much detail a digital camera can capture, even in low light. I've highlighted the best photos. I left the photos of other participants for later. I didn't think they were innocent. They must have known that Jenny was there without her husband, and in my opinion, that should have made her untouchable, so to hell with them. On Monday, I began to seriously prepare for my departure. Jenny didn't expect me back from my business trip until Friday. I had 4 days to organize everything and try to do it right. I went to the first of 5 local car dealerships in search of my next vehicle. After finding a good match in 2 of them, I finalized the deal with the best offer and drove off the dealer lot in a used camper van with a check for $2,000, leaving behind my 1-year-old Chrysler 300. The dealer had the benefit of the doubt. Deal, but I did everything right, and now I had a vehicle in which to travel. On Tuesday and Wednesday, I worked on financial matters and equipping the van with everything necessary for a long trip. By Thursday, I was ready, a full day ahead of schedule, and it was one of those days when Jenny was working at the store. When I got home, I packed all the things I wanted to take into the van. There were few of them, and they did not clutter up the space too much. I left a note on the kitchen table with 2 photos, one of her with Goose and Thompson, and a wedding photo of us torn in half. I thought about keeping the engagement ring, but decided I could sell it somewhere down the road. It was made of gold and must have cost at least 1 tank of gasoline. The note read, "Jenny, I will not live with a liar and a cheater. Goodbye." My first stop would be Naples, Florida, where my parents settled after my father retired. The van was pleasant to drive. I drove 12 hours a day, mostly on back roads, before finding a campsite to spend the night. I quickly learned that there are good campsites and bad ones. I needed to learn to differentiate between the two if I was going to be traveling for any length of time. On the 3rd day in the evening, I drove up to my parents' house. Mom hugged me tightly, and Dad even gave me a man hug. They knew I was coming to visit, but didn't know the details. It would be difficult. They both loved Jenny and were looking forward to the call that they would become grandparents. What's going on, George? Why are you here? I didn't want to go into detail right away, not on the porch. When we entered the house, I asked. Jenny called, looking for me. Mom looked sad. Why would she look for you? Doesn't she know you're here? She's probably too embarrassed to call and talk to you. I left Jenny. I caught her cheating. Mom was shocked. I cannot believe it. Not Jenny. Please believe me, Mom. I don't want to show you pictures to prove it. She became interested in our neighbors. They participate in sex parties. Dad finally found the words. Why? The devil knows. I found out about this and decided to leave. I haven't talked to Jenny, and I don't plan to. Are you going to get a divorce? That's the point, Dad. I went to a lawyer and found out how much I would be ripped off if we filed for divorce. I'll be paying her child support for years. It will not happen. I just left. This is not like you, son. No, it doesn't look like it. But maybe it's time to change your habits. I graduated from college in 3 years, went straight into the Army, where I spent 4 years. Came out, got a job the first month, got married, and then spent 5 years trying to get ahead to raise children with the love of his life. So here I am, 30 years old. No kids, no wife, a 4-year-old van, and about $6,000 in the bank. Great deal, right? Mom put in her 2 cents. Isn't it possible to forgive Jenny and return to her? That is, if she apologizes and promises not to do it again. I felt sorry for my mother. Always an optimist, always ready to forgive, always thinks only good things about people. I hugged her. No, Mom, you didn't see what I saw. She's been with more than one guy. You didn't hear how she pretended to miss me when she thought I was going on a business trip, before arranging a meeting with neighbors and their friends. Lying was almost as bad as cheating. Both destroyed my trust in her. Around 7 in the evening, my sister Gina came to our parents' house. It was nice to see my little sister again. Even though she was 5 years younger than me, we were pretty close until I left for college. We always found time to talk when I came home for the holidays. But when I joined the Army, maintaining this closeness became more difficult. I never realized how much I missed her and how much she has matured until this evening. We walked along the beach. The sun had just set and the sky was bright red. Without Mom and Dad, we could talk openly. Jenny called me last night. She said you left and only left a note. Did she tell you what the note said and why I left? No, she only asked that if I heard from you, I would ask you to call her so she could explain. So tell me, big brother, what's going on? Jenny got carried away with our neighbors' sex parties, without me, of course. I was supposed to be on a business trip. I filmed her with 5 different guys. I think Gina was taken aback by my revelation. Oh shit, have you hired a private detective? No, I didn't go on a business trip because I knew something would happen. I saw the message on her phone. Stayed at a hotel nearby and rented a party myself. They weren't too secretive. Once I had the proof, I quit my job, bought a van, and left Minneapolis. Now I'm going to travel for a while. I'll start with the States, and if there is money left, maybe I'll go to Europe. What about Jenny? Are you going to get a divorce? Like I told Mom and Dad, divorce will ruin me. I'll be paying her for years. It will not happen. I just leave everything. Well, would you consider taking your little sister with you? I have a few weeks of vacation, and I'd like to spend them on the road with you, as long as I don't bother you. Gina smiled a sly smile. Gina, this is not about finding a replacement for Jenny. It's about getting your thoughts in order. Understood. Anyway, if you're heading out west, I'd like to join you for a couple of weeks. I heard that Utah is beautiful. Agreed. We'll go in the fall, when there will be fewer people and it won't be so hot. Now I need you to do me one big favor. I need your computer expertise. Gina was one of those rare women who didn't let sexist bullies stop her from becoming an expert programmer. What do you need, big brother? I told Gina about the videos and photos from Jenny's sex party and what I planned to do with them. As I laid out my plan for revenge, Gina's smile grew wider until she began to laugh. Agreed, big brother. I can arrange this. It took several weeks to organize everything and cover our tracks so that nothing would lead to us. But 3 weeks after I left Minnesota, everything was ready. I knew Gina was good with computers, but what she was able to do amazed me. First, Gina and her boyfriend Dennis found the names and personal information of all the singles and all but one couple who attended the goods parties. In just 2 days, they sent phishing emails to every participant's computer, which, when the recipient clicked on the link, downloaded a virus that gave Gina access to all of the victims' contacts, including email addresses. It was a bonanza. Kyle Good owned a local John Deere dealership and was a prime target. Gina and Dennis hacked into the store's computer and downloaded customers' email and physical addresses. A website was created and hosted by a company in Ukraine specializing in amateur adult films. When I asked how we did all this without fear of being tracked, Gina and Dennis just laughed, then tried to explain how the hosting was paid for in Bitcoin and all the routes went through so many nodes that only the CIA could find us. I nodded my head as they explained it all, but it was still unclear, and I decided to trust their expertise. Harry Thompson was an enigma. We weren't able to hack his computer, and we weren't able to find out much personal information about him. He wasn't on Facebook, LinkedIn, or other social media sites. The goods computer didn't have his email address, so we couldn't find out where Harry worked, a complete mystery. Dennis suggested that Harry was probably involved in some illegal activity, and we eventually gave up trying to find anything on Harry. Gina had a friend who was an expert in video editing, and he spent time creating an entertaining film from videos and photographs. Each time a new sex scene appeared in the video, the action was paused to superimpose close-ups of the participants' faces from photographs to identify them. The 45-minute video was uploaded to the website and was ready. This next part will probably anger some people and make others shake their heads in disgust. When we edited the video, I didn't include the scene where Jenny has a threesome with Kyle and Harry. We left one scene where Jenny has sex with another man, but only one scene enough to show her participation in the event, but not so much as to cause her too much embarrassment. A lot of people have asked me why I didn't throw Jenny under the bus and expose all of her nasty stuff, and I have only one answer: Jenny's parents. Robert and Linda Rawlings are two of the kindest, sweetest people I have ever known. They accepted me into their family, treated me like a son, and if they ever saw or heard about our video, they deserved better than to see their daughter in that light, even if she didn't deserve it, breaking my heart. So while the video clearly proved Jenny's involvement, it didn't include her worst moments. One sunny morning in Florida, Gina arrived at her parents' house. She sat down at the kitchen table with her usual cup of black coffee and asked a question. "Everything is ready, elder brother. The site is launched, letters are loaded, a couple of hundred letters to goods clients who do not have email have been sent. Are you ready to press the button? It's time to act." "Yes, Gina, it's time. Let's get started and have some fun." Gina took out her phone and gave the command. "Dennis, send letters." Gina looked at me. "Our friend is flying to Vegas today. He'll send the letters when he lands so they can't be traced back to us. I think we covered our tracks as best we could." "Thank you, Gina. Thanks for everything. I'm leaving tomorrow to start my travels." Gina handed me a credit card. Dennis suggested one more thing. It was his idea to have me sign up for a credit card in my name, for cases when you need to pay for something and cannot use cash. He said many state and national campgrounds require reservations, and you'll need a credit card for that. The card is in my name, but it won't matter if you make reservations in my name, and I won't complain to the bank about fraud. This way, no one can track you through the card. The limit is $5,000. You can return it to me when it's convenient. I hugged Gina. It was almost too much to expect. "Thank you. Thank Dennis, too. Well, don't forget that you promised that we would go together later. Like I said, it's too hot and crowded in Utah's national parks right now. Let's plan to meet at the end of September and visit some of these parks." Agreement on a 2-week trip in September. Gina headed to work. I went to get the van ready for the trip. The next morning, I kissed my mom goodbye and gave my dad a manly hug. thanked them for letting me stay for a while, promised to be careful and keep in touch. Then my father surprised me by leaning toward the open passenger door window of the van. "I love you, son." I always knew he loved me. He showed it 1,000 times when I was growing up, but he never said it. My eyes watered as I pulled out of the driveway. I took the back roads north through Virginia to the Blue Ridge Parkway and spent a week traveling southwest to North Carolina. Went north to Nashville, where I spent 2 days on Broadway listening to great music. Visited Shiloh National Monument. Always wanted to see it ever since I gave a report on Western battles of the Civil War in high school. Started heading west with a plan to stop in Memphis to spend time on Beale Street and maybe visit Graceland. It was the middle of the night, and I was sleeping in a van parked along State Route 64 east of Bolivar, Tennessee, when I was awakened by a knock on the door. It was a state patrol officer standing with one hand on the butt of his service pistol. The holster was unfastened. "Can I help you, officer?" "How long have you been parked here?" "I parked around 10 in the evening. Too tired to drive any further, I decided to get some sleep." "Can I see your driver's license?" I handed him my license, and he returned to his patrol car to check it. I sat in the passenger seat and waited for him to return. When he approached, I began to worry. Something in his gaze alarmed me. He still had his hand on the gun. "Mr. Baker, did you know that there was an arrest warrant issued for you?" "No, I didn't know." "Does it indicate what exactly?" "I didn't get any details. It's a misdemeanor warrant." "Is there a reason someone is looking for you in Minnesota?" I gave the officer a short version of what happened. Then he added, "I think some judge awarded my wife alimony and I didn't pay it." The officer smiled. "Well, I have to detain you. But now I need to catch a car that just drove by at high speed. I think it's a drunk driver, and that's more important than your warrant. You can stay here and wait for me to return, or since the state line is 30 minutes away, you could head south on Route 18 and get out of my jurisdiction. Do you understand what I mean? I didn't see any speeding cars, so I figured the officer was doing me a favor. Perhaps he had his own history of heartache." I nodded. "Yes, officer. You won't set me up, right?" "Officer, you can ask anyone, even my future ex-wife. I would rather cut off my left hand than frame the person who helped me. I would advise you to cross the border sooner rather than later." With that, he headed west, and I headed south into Mississippi. Given that I had missed Beale Street, I was drawn to the Song of New Orleans and its Bourbon Street and continued south. 3 days of drinking and listening to jazz, Zydeco, and Creole music took a toll on my wallet. I pawned my gold wedding ring, bought a tank of gas, 2 bottles of Dixie, and a large bowl of etouffee before heading west. I needed to avoid major cities and their associated expenses until my funds dried up. I still had a few thousand, but I was spending it too quickly. I talked to a few other wanderers on the road and learned from them how to cut costs associated with my new lifestyle. One way was to dry camp on BLM lands, which was very cheap. One couple I met along the way suggested that I go to Big Bend National Park. They described it as heaven. Why not? With no specific destination and no one waiting for me there, I headed to Big Bend. I was sitting at the bar at the Starlight Theatre Steakhouse in Terlingua, just outside the park, listening to a group of Australians at the next table bantering with each other. I think I was listening too closely to them, trying to understand their dialect, when the largest of the group, a mountain of a man 6 feet 6 inches tall and weighing at least 250 pounds, stood up from the table and walked towards me. "It's rude to eavesdrop on other people's conversations, buddy." I must have been in the mood for a one-liner, because my answer might have earned me a punch to the nose. "I wouldn't call it eavesdropping, considering I don't understand half of what you all say, with your funny accents and all." The mountain man was stunned. "Well, you're a cheeky Yankee. What makes you think it's our accent that's funny and not yours?" "Well, you're sitting in a Texas bar, so it's your accent that's weird. If we were sitting in a bar in Brisbane, then mine would be strange. And considering that you are a guest in my country, let me buy you a beer." All hostility disappeared thanks to my refusal to be intimidated and, mainly, due to my offer to buy him beer. The mountain of a man extended his hand. "My name is John, the beer is Foster's, and you are invited to join our table." "I'm George, and I accept the invitation. I haven't spent much time in a company since I've been in Florida, and even though I only understood half of what was being said, if the speaker didn't bother to explain it in English, I had the best time in months. These people knew how to drink and have fun. Even the ladies drank more than me. There were 8 of them traveling together. They spent 4 weeks in the S, starting in Dallas. Eventually, they invited me to join their camping caravan. They appeared to be in pairs. One of the couples, James and Sarah, were married. Others had friends with benefits relationships. Although I was the odd one out, I decided this was too good an opportunity to pass up and spent the next 2 weeks with them. After we left Texas, our caravan traveled to Roswell, New Mexico. Australians were eager to see where all this UFO hysteria began. It was almost a failure, but at least now we could all say we were there and cross it off our lists. The White Sands Monument was interesting. Although the men wanted to continue west to Tombstone, the women voted against it. It'll be another tourist trap, so we headed north to Colorado instead. I stayed out of the discussion and was happy to be anywhere with this fun group. The Colorado Rockies blew my mind. I was not ready for such beauty. I grew up in the Midwest and spent all my time east of the Rockies. The Australians and I spent the last week crossing the state before parting ways at Breckenridge. They were returning to Texas. I was heading to Grand Junction, where Gina was supposed to meet me. We spent the last evening going from bar to bar on Main Street before I said goodbye, promising to visit Australia someday. As I walked back to my van, Mary came up to me and took my hand. "Can I stay with you tonight?" I was surprised, pleasantly surprised, but I didn't want to fight with my new friends, and I never wanted to be that guy who interferes with others' relationships. "What about John? Would he mind if you stayed with me? John has an eye for that American blonde with the fake breasts, and by all accounts, he will spend the night with her. John and I travel well together and have a lot of fun, but we're not what you'd call exclusive." Mary's offer was tempting. "I've never had a one-night stand. I guess I'm an old-fashioned guy who prefers to be in a relationship when he sleeps with a girl." "Does this mean you won't sleep with me?" I looked at Mary, deciding to end my long abstinence. "Hell no, come with me." I put my arm around Mary's waist and led her to the van. We drove back to the campsite, while Mary flattered me by telling me she had been hoping for this opportunity ever since we met. "And other girls will turn green with envy. We all think you're a cute and special guy." Within minutes of parking the van at the spot, we were naked and playing with each other's bodies. It had been months since I was last with Jenny. I decided to take my time to become reacquainted with the female body, and Mary seemed to appreciate my efforts. When I woke up the next morning, Mary was already dressed and sitting on the bed, holding my hand. Seeing that I opened my eyes, she leaned over and kissed me. "Goodbye, George. Don't let what that woman did to you affect your relationship with someone else. There are many good, faithful women in the world. You are a wonderful man, and you will find one of them." I couldn't resist. "Is there any chance that this woman will be you?" "No, I'm afraid we won't succeed. Either I will be too far from my family, or you will be too far from yours. I've been listening to you for the last 2 weeks. You are close to your sister and parents. I couldn't tear you away from them. And no grandmother wants to be half a world away from her grandchildren." Mary was right, of course. Thank God the first woman I had sex with, Jenny, was smarter and more practical than me. Well, I had to ask. "Thanks for last night. You'll never know how much it meant to me." "I think I know. It meant a lot to me, too. Take care, George. Enjoy your hikes with your sister." Mary kissed me on the lips and left the van. All the other Australians came to see me at the station before leaving this morning. I was especially pleased to receive a firm handshake and hug from John. His smile was wide as he reminded me of my promise to come to Australia someday. Driving towards Grand Junction, I felt good. Hanging from the rearview mirror was the necklace Mary had left that morning. There was a note in the ashtray. "This is for Gina. Tell your sister that I'm sorry we didn't meet, and that her brother is a gentleman and a great guy. With love, Mary." It was an inexpensive shell necklace that Mary always wore, and the note meant the world to me. Gina and I were walking through Arches National Park, heading toward Delicate Arch, when we crossed paths with another hiker. Abby Ross walked alone. She is approximately 5 feet 7 inches tall and built like an athlete. She has long black hair that is naturally shiny and complements her dark skin and very dark eyes. She passed Gina and I on the trail. We exchanged short greetings, and after she passed, Gina caught me staring at her perfect ass and legs. Gina poked me in the ribs and asked, "What?" Gina simply smiled at my attempt to play innocence. "All of you men are the same. Just because a woman has the body of a goddess, you can't help but turn into jelly. Oh, and you say that women are different. I saw you practically drooling over that tall guy when we were at the airport carousel waiting for your luggage. Damn, I almost took a photo of you to send to Dennis. Let him see how you act when he's not around." God, do not dare. I admit I looked, but I would never touch it. I've been completely faithful to Dennis since we've been together. So you are serious with him? Like a heart attack. I think he's going to propose when I get back to Florida. He wanted to join us on this journey, but he couldn't get out. I was happy for my sister. She deserved a good guy like Dennis. When we got to the top, I was pleased to find that a female tourist was sitting there taking pictures of the arch. Gina did me a big favor by coming up and introducing herself, while I stayed 20 feet away and opened my backpack, preparing lunch. The exchange between the two women was friendly. By the time I had everything ready, Gina came up to me with her and introduced us. "Abby, this is my brother, George. George, this is Abby Ross." I invited her to join us for lunch and finally convinced her. We ate, told stories, and when it was time to go down, we went together. When Gina learned that Abby had not found a place to stay, she invited Abby to share our place in Devil's Garden. Abby protested, but was unable to dissuade Gina. The three of us had dinner together and spent a lovely night under the stars around the fire. Thus began my friendship with Abby Ross from Klamath Falls, Oregon. Abby went hiking with us in Arches and Canyonlands. Then she agreed to join us when we went to Goblin State Park. Abby was a waitress in Klamath Falls and had recently graduated from the local community college. We eventually found out that she was traveling and camping alone because her long-term boyfriend had left her for another girl 3 weeks before they were supposed to go on this trip. Abby decided to go alone, but was happy to join Gina and me. I didn't expect how lonely it would be without him. Thank you both for letting me join. After Goblin, Abby had to go home, and we promised each other to stay in touch. I had another week to spend with Gina. We said goodbye to Abby before heading to Bryce. In the van, Gina began the interrogation. "Well, what do you think, big brother? Nice girl, isn't she?" "Very nice girl," I agreed, "but I didn't get any romantic vibes from her, so what's your question?" "My question is that she was still hurting over the recent breakup, but I caught her looking at you in more than just a friendly way a few times. Give her time and she'll be ready for romance." Nothing more was said between us about our new friend for the next week, but when I took Gina to the airport, she started talking about it again. "Call her George. Maybe go to Klamath Falls and spend a couple of days with her without me. I bet you $100 she'll say yes if you ask if you can come." Okay, just so you stop tormenting me, I'll call. Say hi to Mom and Dad for me and wish Dennis well. Call me when you land." I returned to my van and took out the map. 1,000 miles if you take the scenic route. Best of all, most of the route is on US 50 through Nevada, the loneliest road in America. How symbolic. I was in no rush and didn't mind being alone, especially after 2 weeks with the Aussies and the next 2 weeks with Gina. This gave me time to think. By the time I reached Reno, I had made my decision and called Abby. She sounded pleased to hear me and agreed without hesitation when I asked if she wanted company. Abby had to work the next 2 days, then she had 3 days off, so I was in no hurry and arrived on the morning of her first day off. So I took my time and arrived on the morning of her first day off. Abby and I spent the 3 days hiking and exploring the southwest corner of Oregon, from Crater Lake to Ashland, where we saw Shakespeare's As You Like It at a replica Globe Theater. It was a wonderful 3 days, and although the van was cramped, nothing romantic happened other than us holding hands. I wish I could have done more, but it was very clear that Abby wasn't ready for that kind of relationship. Still, it was fun, and when I dropped her off on Thursday, I vowed to head back through Klamath Falls when I returned from my next stop, Glacier National Park. I needed to get up there as quickly as possible. It was already the end of October, and winter was soon to come, especially at high altitudes. It was during my stay in Glacier that I received the answer to one of my questions regarding future employment. I approached one of my former commanders, and she responded with an offer to provide translation services as a contractor. The best thing is that the assignment was at the Paris embassy. I had 3 weeks to catch a plane to Paris. I left Glacier that same day. I spent 2 days with Abby. She was able to swap shifts with 2 other servers, and we spent the 2 days getting to know each other better. We ended up kissing and hugging, but nothing more. It's always dangerous to go down the slippery slope of comparing one woman to another. Jenny could lie in bed for hours. On weekends, she would finish her second cup of coffee and look through half of one of her magazines without even thinking about getting up. By the time she got out of bed, I had already finished breakfast and morning chores. Abby couldn't wait to get up and attack them. By 10 o'clock, we will be 8 miles from the trail, or halfway to the top of the mountain. Another important difference was what each woman read. I've never seen Jenny with a book in her hands. Abby didn't just read books, she read literature. She was the first woman I met who had already read the brothers Karamazov, Anna Karenina, and War and Peace. The more time I spent with Abby, the more I realized that we had similar views on almost everything that I considered important. And perhaps just as important for a long-term relationship, I was completely captivated by her physical beauty. I hoped that her ex-boyfriend who lived with us would not discover his mistake and try to rekindle their romance while I was abroad. I fell in love with Abby and told her so, but I will be gone next year and have not been able to properly explain the nature of our relationship. Stupid me. We planned to invite her to visit me in Paris. I drove straight to Naples, stopping at stops along the way to get my usual 6 hours of sleep. Following the highway allowed me, exhausted but happy, to drive into my parents' driveway within 4 days. I had no problems obtaining the necessary documents and visas, which meant that something had changed in Minnesota. The charges against me were dropped. I was no longer a fugitive. 10 days after arriving in Florida, I kissed my parents and sister goodbye and boarded a plane to Paris. I met Simone Pirot in Paris. She was 25 years old and different from all the girls and women I had known up to that moment. My parents would call her type bohemian. When we first went to bed, I felt like a pervert. She was a tiny creature, almost boy-like, with her slender French body and cup breasts. But as soon as she tucked me into her bed, any thoughts that she wasn't a woman at all went right out the window. This woman could have sex, with a capital S, crap. When we weren't having sex, we hung out in cafes with her other bohemian friends, smoking Gauloises and drinking absinthe. We read and debated about Camus, Beauvoir, and Sartre. The more I read about Sartre's apologies for Stalin's words about the abuses in the Soviet Union, the less fascinated I was by him, and the more I idolized Camus. Simone and I often argued about this, and then we always had great make-up sex. The arguments were almost worth it. It was very funny. I felt like Ernest Hemingway at the beginning of the 20th century. I never thought about falling in love with Simone. She was too different in her politics and values. We played together for 4 months before she left Paris with another couple and headed to the Mediterranean town of Cap d'Agde. I missed sex, but not philosophical discussions, which could become outdated. It was probably the right time for us to break up, because I had been putting off visiting Abby for the past month. I made good money and knew that the cost of a plane ticket would be too high for a waitress salary, so I sent the plane tickets to Abby. She will be here for 2 weeks in mid-May. Contrary to the song, May is much nicer than April. I have to say, I wasn't prepared for my reaction when I picked up Abby in De Gaulle. I watched her walk towards me. All my loving feelings for her overflowed inside me. She put down her travel bag to hug and kiss me. She held my head in her hands, not letting the kiss end until she realized that we were in a public place. But it was a very French moment. I took Abby to my house, told her to take a nap. She was in touch with O'Hare. We were planning to go out somewhere in the evening to celebrate her arrival. I went to work for a few hours, and when I returned to the apartment, I was wonderfully surprised. Abby had obviously spent some time looking for city clothes. I've never seen her in anything other than street clothes. Here she was dressed in the most matching skirt and sweater, a stylish leather jacket and high heels. She saw the expression on my face. "You like it? It is fantastic. Let me clean up and change into something suitable to accompany such a beautiful woman." It was a wonderful first night. Paris seemed to welcome Abby into her heart. The best part was that Abby and I made love for the first time that night. I spent the next 5 days showing Abby all the usual sights of Paris: the Louvre and Orsay Museum, Notre Dame, the Shakespeare and Co. bookstore, and the top of the Eiffel Tower are at least 8 attractions on Abby's must-see list. On the 6th day, we took the high-speed train and traveled 3.5 hours to Grenoble. When I told Abby what was on my mind, she protested that she didn't have any decent hiking boots or clothes with her. Then she protested when I took her to a street store to supply her with everything she needed. She continued to protest until I convinced her it was a late Christmas and early birthday present. Although there was still snow on the higher ground, we walked where we could along the alpine trails. 3 days later, we left to return to Paris and continued to check off Abby's list of things to do in Paris. Everything was going great until last night, when we stopped at a small cafe for a goodbye drink before heading back to my apartment. Everything went wrong there. A group of Simone's friends, people who knew that Simone and I were a couple, saw us and insisted that we join them. At some point, Abby and I grew apart. She was talking to 2 women, and I was talking to men. When it was time to leave, I saw it in Abby's eyes. "When were you going to tell me about Simon?" "I didn't mean to. It was a short affair with a woman before you and I became intimate. Now that you and I have become lovers, I am ready to be faithful to you. I promise I won't be with another woman as long as we're together." Abby was not satisfied with this. "I thought we were lovers when you left Klamath Falls in November. You told me you loved me. I thought it meant something." I said I was falling in love with you, and it actually meant something. We had to define what that meant. Abby started crying. "I'm such a fool." She went into the bedroom and began packing for her flight, again at night. She left the bedroom with teary eyes. "I'll take a taxi to the airport." "Let me take you." "No, now I need to be alone. I'm sorry this happened last night. I had such a good time with you, and now I feel like I'm just a temporary replacement until Simone returns to Paris." "It is not true." "Perhaps, but I need to think about it. Call me and we'll talk." "It may be some time before we can talk. Tomorrow I'm leaving for Moscow for important negotiations. While I'm there, communication will be limited due to the nature of these negotiations. Let me take you to the airport." "No, just call when you can." Abby raised her hand behind my head and pulled me in for a kiss. "I love you, George Baker." She left without saying another word, but before the door closed, I told her, "And I love you, Abby Ross." I was right. Over the next 2 weeks in Moscow, communication was short and limited to family members. When I returned to Paris, my first call to Abby was tense. Before we could improve relations, I had to go to Moscow again because the agreements reached during the first negotiations began to fall apart. Talk about bad timing. Abby wasn't being mean about it. On the contrary, she was trying her best to show that she understood. But we needed to talk, and soon, before everything fell apart. Gina, Dennis, Mom and Dad came to visit in July. One of the great advantages of serving in Paris was that it did not take much effort to persuade people to come and stay. Try the same in some of my previous army garrisons. Gina brought great news. Jenny called her to explain why I was no longer a fugitive. Jenny was renting out our old house to a couple, and they wanted to buy it. Selling the house would pay off the mortgage and any outstanding debts owed to Jenny. If I sign the papers renouncing any claim to the house, Jenny will close the case. And best of all, Jenny filed for divorce, citing abandonment. We will be officially divorced by next June without any additional effort on my part. Gina brought documents. I signed them and sent them to Jenny. We had a great time in Paris. The only exception was when Gina made fun of me for letting Abby go. Gina, I'm not trying. I'll sort everything out when I get back to the States. I promise. Damn it. You're such a fool, big brother. Do you think a woman with your looks, personality, and intelligence will miss your sorry ass for a long time? She was right. But for the next few months, all I could do was Skype with Abby and write love letters. My first stop upon returning to the States was Klamath Falls. Abby not only welcomed me with open arms, she did everything she could to show that we were a couple again. But there was one big problem. I needed a job, and the only West Coast offer I got was from a tech company in Los Angeles. Family was very important to Abby, and she wanted to stay close to her family, while I needed to be where there were opportunities for my major, and Klamath Falls was not a place that required those skills. We were both on the same continent, finally, but we lived 700 miles apart. For the next few months, we spent at least one weekend a month together, either in Klamath Falls or Los Angeles. In May, we took 2 weeks off and went hiking in Joshua Tree, Kings Canyon, and Death Valley. There was no doubt that we were compatible and in love, but I still had problems making up my mind about marriage. This was most likely due to my own lack of confidence and other trust issues. Let's be honest, my history with women doesn't inspire confidence. Jenny didn't leave me, but I wasn't good enough for her to stay faithful. And although we were not suitable for each other, it was Simone who left me, and not the other way around. Abby claims she loves me, but not enough to leave her family and join me in California. Abby and I continued to date whenever we could. I was 100% faithful and had no doubt that she was too. I didn't give up. I kept looking for a way for us to be together. Sometimes life throws you unexpected gifts, sometimes it punches you in the gut, and sometimes, as if by order, you come across the perfect moment that cannot be missed. I received 2 such gifts in July. First, a New York publishing house offered me my dream job. I have been chosen to translate Joseph Stalin's personal papers and letters from Russian to English for an upcoming book. The documents had already been translated by a Russian translator, but the publisher realized how much had been watered down. I should have provided the second translation without bias. The work will take some time, and best of all, I could do it from anywhere, even Klamath Falls. And then, less than a week after signing a contract with a publisher, the incredible happened. 2 years and 2 months after I left my home in Minnesota, I woke up to a knock on the door. I put on my sweatpants and walked to the door. I opened it, wondering who could be so rude as to wake me up at 7 in the morning. Jenny was standing there. "Hi, George." Not the greeting I expected after such a long time. I looked down at Jenny's hands to see if she was holding a gun, but all she was holding was a manila envelope. "Can I come in, George?" I stepped aside and let Jenny into the room. "Should I make some coffee?" "It would be nice. I left the hotel this morning before breakfast." I decided to be polite. Time softens a broken heart. "I'll make scrambled eggs." "I didn't come for breakfast, George. I came to convey this." Jenny held out the envelope. "Our divorce was finalized 2 months ago. I thought you should know. I used leaving my family as a reason." I glanced through the documents. "You could mail it. There's nothing here that I need to sign." Jenny began to lose her composure. Her voice rose. "I wanted to convey this personally. I didn't want to be a coward like you. I wanted to look you in the eye and let you know how much I hated you for leaving like that. without a word, just with a note. And I wanted a wife who doesn't spread her legs for a bunch of bastards. Jenny collapsed on the sofa, sobbing. But that didn't stop me. You have no idea how much my heart broke when I saw you with Hood and those other idiots. Jenny managed to apologize between sobs. I'm sorry. Me too. I thought we were in love and ready to start a family. I was ready to have our children. Then that bitch Doris started coming to our house for coffee. She filled my head with all kinds of nonsense. She said that when you finally realize what you're missing, you'll join their group. This would never happen. I truly believed this when we exchanged our vows to reject all others. And I really believed it when I said that you are the only woman for me. Jenny lowered her head, looking at the floor. My curiosity got the better of me, and I asked her, "So what happened after I left? Have you stayed in the group?" "No, I never did that again. I probably didn't talk to Doris more than 2 or 3 times after I came home and found your note, and only because she could not avoid it. Plus, your little bomb blew everything up." Jenny noticed the look in my eyes when she said, "Your little bombshell." Oh, George, don't pretend you weren't the one who posted the videos and photos or failed to send anonymous emails to half of Minneapolis. Everyone suspected it was you, but no one had evidence. You had. I didn't think about it at the time, but I realized later that I left that photo of you, Kyle, and Harry on the dining room table. If anyone saw the photo, they would have proof that I am behind the website. I burned the photo 10 minutes after I saw it. I felt bad that we had evidence of my promiscuous behavior in our home, and even if I had not destroyed it, I would never have shared it with others. I couldn't betray you a second time. What happened? First of all, Kyle Good lost his John Deere dealership. His contract with Deere included a community standards clause. Who would have thought progressives in Minnesota would be so outraged by the goods parties? When people stopped buying from the store, Deere left, leaving Kyle to sell cheap Chinese tractors and junk. The store went bankrupt, Kyle was deeply in debt, and Doris left for Harry. Seriously, I was pleased with this turn of events, but Jenny wasn't finished yet. Kyle killed himself. Was Doris able to live happily with Kyle's best friend? Jenny shook her head. No, it turned out that Harry had anger problems, and after he sent Doris to the hospital, he ended up in prison. He will be there for at least 8 years. 8 years for beating a woman. What did he do to her? Oh, it's not just that. When police went to his home, they found him distributing oxycodone. He got a year for beating Doris and 10 years for the substances. It just kept getting better and better. I couldn't help but laugh. Jenny continued. 2 other couples moved out. It seems that the school authorities did not take kindly to primary school teachers being involved in a sex scandal. And you, Jenny? Well, other than completely ruining my personal life by driving away the man I loved, my professional life has been pretty good. No one was particularly interested in the personal life of the clothing salesman. I cut my hair and dyed my hair, and most people didn't even know it was me in those videos. Some people knew, and sometimes I had to face the consequences. I switched to a full-time job and took night classes at a community college. I got my associate's degree and now manage a Banana Republic store in St. Louis Park. Well done. And I really thought so. As I said, time has softened me. Jenny started crying. Do you see an opportunity for us to get back together, George? I may have mellowed, but my brain didn't turn into Swiss cheese. No, sorry, Jenny, this won't happen. All trust is gone. Seeing you with those idiots destroyed him. And you know as well as I do that a marriage without trust will not be happy. I knew you would say that, George, but I needed to ask. As soon as I saw your face and heard your voice, I remembered what I had lost. So I had to try again. Sorry, George. With these words, Jenny began to sob again. Damn it, I once loved this woman with all my heart. In the evening, Jenny and I had dinner. At dinner, I just had to ask. Why, Jenny? I thought we had a good marriage. Why did you let Doris talk you into this? George, I've always been such a good girl. I've never done anything even slightly wild. You were the second man in my life. Doris played on my naivety. She convinced me that sooner or later you would join in the fun. She said that no normal man could resist the opportunity to have several women. She made me think there was something wrong with your libido if you resisted, that you are the pervert, not us. This would never happen, Jenny. The vow to deny all others meant everything to me. Jenny nodded as if agreeing with me before finishing her explanation. Doris gave me the book, Because He's Watching, by Kristen McCallum. It was about a married couple where the husband gets turned on by watching his wife have sex with other men. She also showed me how to find sex sites on the internet. The more time I spent reading and watching it, the easier it was for Doris and Kyle to talk me into going to that first party. I was the center of attention, the prom queen, and it fed my ego. Going to the party you caught me at the second time wasn't that hard. I drove Jenny back to her hotel. I saw that she was waiting for me to ask if I could spend the night, but I stayed strong. Yes, I could take it and go, but that would be wrong for many reasons, not the least of which was my commitment to Abby. I woke up the next morning and looked at the clock. It was only 7, and Jenny's plane didn't leave until 11. Enough time to pick her up and take her to Los Angeles for her flight. Another chance to spend a few hours with the woman I wanted to spend my life loving. I sat down and drank a cup of coffee instead. There was something on my mind that woke me up at 3 a.m. and kept me awake for 2 hours. Now everything has become clear. My last night with Jenny was like a cleansing of all the bile that had accumulated in my head and heart. My soul was cleansed. I didn't realize until last night how important it was to close this chapter of my life with Janie in order to start a new chapter with someone else, with Abby. I showered, packed the car, and locked the apartment. With any luck, I'll drive 700 miles and be in Klamath Falls before Abby finishes her shift tonight. I called, hoping it wasn't too early to call someone who worked the late shift. She must have seen my name on the screen. Her voice sounded sleepy. "Hi, George." "Good morning, Abby. Sorry to wake you, but I wanted to ask if I could pick you up from work tonight." "Why, where are you?" "I'm just leaving Thousand Oaks. I have to be there by 11. "Something happened?" "No, I just want to spend a couple of days with you. If you can take some time, maybe we can walk and talk a little." "Certainly. I'll switch shifts with Janet tomorrow. Are you sure you can drive all the way?" "Everything will be fine. I'll see you at 11. 200 miles north, I realized I was going to propose empty-handed. I stopped at the Ben Bridge store in Sacramento. I was looking at wedding rings when my eyes fell on a display of sapphires next to diamonds. One ring caught my attention. I approached him, to the surprise of the saleswoman. "Sapphire?" "Yes, this is it. An unconventional ring for an unconventional lady. It's perfect. Put it in a box, no need to pack." The saleswoman smiled. "She'll love it. What about the size?" "I hope she says yes, then we'll worry about the size." She placed the ring in a nice blue box and swiped my credit card. "Thank you. Good luck, but I can tell she would be stupid to say no." Back on I-5, heading north. I called Gina while I was driving, putting the phone on speaker so I wouldn't get a stupid fine today. "Sis, today is the day. I'm coming to see Abby with a ring in my pocket and hope in my heart." Gina practically screamed over the phone. "Well done, George. Do you think she'll say yes?" Gina laughed. "Ask her nicely. She will be your bride by the time you say, 'Do you want?'" "I wish I had your confidence. Wish me luck, sis." Gina was almost right. I pulled up to the front door of the pub at 11:05, and Abby walked out to the car. I opened the door, got down on one knee with the box in my hand. But before I could say, "Would you like it?" she was already in my arms and saying, "Yes," kissing me on the lips, cheeks, nose, and forehead. Looks like I'm getting married again. We spent the next 2 days visiting her family, walking in the mountains, and making love. Abby was especially pleased to hear about my new contract. Seriously, George, will I marry you and live here? Then I realized that Abby had agreed to my marriage proposal without asking about our housing plans. Now, with my new contract, it didn't matter. We could live and raise our children in a place where she could count on the support of her mother and father. The best of all worlds. 2 days later, I was on the road again. It's time to return to Los Angeles and tell your boss the bad news. When I returned home, there was a note on the door. George, I had some time this morning before my flight. I thought I'd stop by and tell you again how sorry I am for betraying your trust. I don't know if we'll ever see each other or talk again, but please understand that I know that it is my immature, selfish behavior to listen to bad advice from Kyle and Doris. That is the only reason we are not husband and wife today, and why I will never give birth to our children. Those children we planned for and fought for. I will always love and miss you. By the way, I understand that you spared me with the video. I know that you must have filmed me with other men and in situations that I will be forever ashamed of. I think you did it to spare my parents and possibly me. Whatever the reasons, I will always be grateful to you for such grace. You are a good person. Jenny. That was the last time I heard from Jenny. It was October, a wonderful time in the Northwest. Abby and I had a small wedding in Klamath Falls. Mom, Dad, Gina, and Dennis came to the wedding. 2 of my friends from the Army also came. It was all from the Baker contingent. Abby's side was full. Friends from school, college, family, and co-workers. We had an open bar, snacks, live music, and a dance floor. It was very funny. Abby and I stayed until the last guest left. Our honeymoon was completely unusual for us. Instead of spending a week camping in the woods or desert, we actually booked a week on the beach in the Virgin Islands. Of course, Abby got up every morning to run a few miles on the beach and then swim a few more miles in the ocean. But every morning, after returning to our cabin and showering, she would pull me back to bed to re-cease our wedding vows. Translating Stalin's documents earned me the reputation of a master of English translation of Russian literature. This way I was able to earn good money, enough to support a growing family and work from home. I had to travel occasionally to meet with authors or publishers, but that was no more than 3 or 4 weeks a year. Abby's mother died of cancer a year after the birth of our first son, George Adam, or G.A. She left quickly, too quickly for Abby, but at least she managed to see her grandson and did not suffer from cancer for a long time. It seemed like Ross' mom was the glue that kept the family together because over the next year, Abby's brother and sister-in-law moved to Tucson to be closer to her family. Abby's father said he grew tired of the cold and moved to Baja, Mexico, near Ensenada. Suddenly, our family had no reason to stay in Oregon. Abby brought this up herself. I think it would be nice to live closer to your parents and Gina. They could spend more time with G.A. We sold our house in Klamath Falls and moved to Naples. 9 months later, Gina Abby was born. Mom and Dad couldn't be happier. Me too. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.